matter of private members' statements, I call the Minister, a member for Northern Tablelands.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. This afternoon I would like to tell a story about triumph through adversity. It all starts, Mr Deputy Speaker, with two of the most humble items in Australian gastronomy, namely the lamb and the potato. Mr Deputy Speaker, they are an absolute staple for country people and this proud nation, and in the Northern Tablelands these two staples are very much part of our daily diet, and indeed our region, some would say, is built on the back of the lamb and the boiled potato. They may be a classic, but in the small proud community of Guyra, that community has been able to work some absolute magic with them. The Lamb and Potato Festival on an annual basis draws in thousands of people from across the district every year, from those who live in our beautiful region to those travelling to boot scoot down the New England Highway at the Tamworth Country Music Festival. But I'm sorry to report that we had one unwelcome visitor who came along to this year's event, the 31st Lamb and Potato Festival. On the Friday, the clouds filled the sky, a gale-force wind began to roar. At the start of the biggest weekend for the festival this year, disaster struck. And for members of this House, don't think you've ever seen a storm until you've seen one in the northwest of New South Wales. They tore through the festival with a great force. They tore apart some of the marquees, they blew over tents, they left hungry visitors with scrapes and bruises, a couple of fractured skulls and some broken bones. One of the festival gazebos actually ended up being perched precariously atop of the town's sheep statue, the big sheep in Guyra. Those close to the site said it was like a tornado. I would like to pay tribute to the men and women of the emergency services for rushing to the scene so quickly, while the rain was still lashing and the wind was still howling, and doing their part to get the festival back on track. The Rural Fire Service, the State Emergency Service, even local electrical contractors helped to reconstruct the tents and secure the scene as quickly as possible. I'd personally like to thank Steve Mepham, Liz Ferris, Angus McDowell and their teams from the Rural Fire Service, as well as the Guyra and Black Mountain Brigades. With their work, alongside committed volunteers like David Godlinton and his team from the State Emergency Service, the festival was back on track in no time. Members of the committee worked through the night, getting in new tents, chipping fallen trees and cleaning up the carnage. Preparations were complete, ready by 11 a.m. Saturday for everyone to turn up for lunch for that iconic lamb and gravy roll. And I'm proud to say, Mr Deputy Speaker, that takings from lunch on that day were the biggest the festival has ever had in 31 years. As well as crewing the RFS response, Steve Mepham also headed the Guyra Lamb and Potato Festival's dedicated team of workers, of which there are far too many to name individually here tonight. But I'd like to take time to just mention a few of the friendly faces you'd all see if you're lucky enough to stop in next year at the 32nd festival. We've got Julie Giddos, who's ranked hundreds of volunteers to work in the kitchen, turning out the food everyone enjoys. I'd like to thank Mark Wirtz, the Treasurer, and Ian Russell, who organises the music. Ian fractured his skull in the storm, and I'd like to wish him a very speedy recovery. Now, Bertha Reeves. Bertha Reeves is an icon of Guyra, and for decades she's been hand-cutting thousands and thousands of potatoes, only stopping this year due to injury. She makes a mean potato bake that people travel for miles to sample each year. Such is the community spirit in Guyra that as soon as she put down the peeler, half a dozen hands leapt in to grab it and to pick up the baton that she left behind. And so the community of Guyra will continue to thrive, Mr Deputy Speaker, and when it's running, what a festival it is. You can have your fill of locally sourced lamb and potatoes, from the rolls, the pies, the chips, the bakes, and more roast than you could poke a chop at. There's local musicians, arts and crafts, as well as displays of vintage vehicles and military machinery. Members of this House, if you value the good, hearty food cooked with soul, then I urge you to come up to Guyra next year in the latter part of January, weather permitting of course, and enjoy the 32nd iteration of the best festival in rural and regional New South Wales, the Guyra Lamb and Potato Festival.
That's why he's the Minister for Tourism.
Mr Speaker.